The 16th century Brabantian scholar Nicolaus Clenardus of the East, who was born by the name of Nicolaas Clenaerts in 1493, has done a number of quite remarkable things. In 1531, he left the Low Countries for the Iberian Peninsula to pursue a study of Arabic, far from evident at the time, and later he crossed to Morocco to study not only Arabic but also Islam, with the end goal of using his linguistic and cultural knowledge to convert the people of Islam to the truth of Christianity. As may be guessed, this project did not work out quite as he expected. But nonetheless, in contrast to his early 14th century Catalan predecessor Raimundus Lullus, Clenardus did live to tell the tale. Clenardus ultimately died in Granada in 1542 and was buried in the Alhambra. But before doing all that, he spent 2 decades here in Louvain, was among the Trilingual College's very first students, and then taught Greek and Hebrew in its shadow. In the last years, before he said his final goodbye to Louvain in 1531, Clenardus published his grammars, 1 of Hebrew and 2 of Greek, which are the grammars which we would like to present to you today.
So Nicolaas Clenardus studied Hebrew at the Collegium Trilingue in Louvain from the professor of Hebrew Johannes Campensis, who taught Hebrew from 1521 to 1532. An eager student, Clenardus mastered the language in almost no time and soon began assisting his former teacher in teaching it. In 1528, Johannes Campensis published his very own grammatical overview of Hebrew based on the grammatical ideas of the contemporary Jewish grammarian Elia Levita. But it lacked clear declension tables. It was too dense, too hard for beginning students to use effectively. Clenardus understood this pedagogical flaw and decided to compose his very own grammatical overview of Hebrew using a maximum of clear declension tables and a minimum of explanatory notes, with also a very handsome Hebrew type, which is large enough for the beginner's eye. Also note that the Hebrew grammar by Clenardus starts from the backside of the book, so to say, like real Jewish Hebrew books. We do not know if Clenardus meant this Hebrew grammar as an appendix to the grammar of Campensis, or whether he wanted to rival his former teacher, as suggested also Henri de Vogt. Now, in any case, this grammar was published 1 year after Campensis's grammar in 1529, also at the presses of Thierry Martens, and became an immediate success. It received multiple reprints, most notably in Paris, in France, where it was also expanded by the Parisian Hebraist Jean Saint-Carbe, in Latin Johannes Quinquarboreus. Ironically, it was regarded as being too succinct, and thus it was expanded with extra explanatory notes. This is also the same case in this volume, this first edition of Louvain, held in this library. The student wrote the translations of numerous Hebrew words into Latin, but he also wrote some interesting grammatical notes there where Clenardus omits extra explanatory notes. For example, this note on nomina perfecta, or perfect nouns, in which the student writes that perfect nouns are nouns in Hebrew which do not lack any root letters, radical letters, and to which are no superfluous letters added.
In 1530, Clenardus' Institutiones in Linguam Graecam, an introductory handbook of Greek grammar, was published in Louvain. Thierry Martens had, shortly before, after printing the Hebrew grammar, retired to his native town of Aalst. So this grammar was printed at the printing shop newly established by Rutgerescius, who also served at the time as the first professor of Greek. It was not the first grammar of Greek to be published in Louvain. In 1520, Jerry Martens had already published another grammar of Greek written by Adrianus Amerotius, who was born Adrien Amerot. Amerotius, who had studied Greek in Paris, taught the language privately in Louvain, and ultimately in 1545 he succeeded Rutgerescius as professor of Greek, a task that he fulfilled until his death in 1560. Amerotius's grammar presumably served as an important help for many students of the language in the years following 1520, until finally it was replaced by Clenardus's grammar of 1530. Probably it served as an important source of inspiration for this grammar. Probably the most remarkable feature of this grammar is a very beautiful table of the Greek verbs presented in the form of a tree. And frankly, it is just visually pleasing in all respects. And quite easy to handle. This copy of Clenarduss Institutions, preserved in Louvain, has been used quite intensively, as is testified by its numerous annotations. And this can clearly be seen on page 23, for example. These notations are found in multiple hands. Typically, these annotations merely add Latin translations to Greek words mentioned in the printed text, but there are also quite a number of other interesting annotations, of which we will mention just a few. For example, on page 27, a mistake in the printed text is corrected. The Greek letter beta is said, in passing, to represent a voiceless sound, while of course it represents a voiced one, and accordingly the tenuem found in the text is crossed out and replaced by mediam. Interestingly, and perhaps tellingly, the pages devoted to the basic verb conjugation have been annotated quite heavily, while the same is not true of the pages devoted to some more advanced topics concerning the Greek verbs, such as contract verbs and athematic verbs. Finally, page 17 has in its upper right corner a rather mysterious annotation, which does not seem to be connected or concerned with anything found on the page or indeed in the grammar. Seemingly, it reads Roi de France régnant, ruling king of France, but why it has been written there is entirely unclear. In 1531, Rutgerescius printed another work of Clenardus, the Meditationes Graecanicae, Grecizing Meditations, in which the basic grammatical knowledge contained in the Institutiones is applied, much as one would do in the classroom, to the reading of an actual Greek text, specifically a letter by Saint Basil. The Meditationes, in fact, contain many references, with indications of page numbers even to the Institutiones, to which they were clearly meant to serve as a kind of sequel, allowing students to consolidate their knowledge, their grammatical knowledge, through practice. Clenardus's works on Greek grammar became highly successful and influential, both in the short and the long run. His material was popular all over Catholic and Protestant Europe. It was used in the Jesuits' teaching during the 16th century, and it also heavily influenced the grammar of Jacob Gretzer, which was to become the standard grammar of the Jesuit order by the end of the century. There were countless prints in the 16th century, dozens in the 17th, and even some in the 18th century. All in all, I dare say Clenardus was one of the most popular and successful grammarians of Greek of the entire early modern period. Moreover, during his time in Portugal, he also wrote a grammar of Latin, which was printed in Braga in 1538. Therefore, Clenardus can be said to have written grammars of all three sacred languages, which is just one of the many rare feats of these Brabanthian humanists.